10 footballers who hate their family. From a player abandoned by his father, to another who was swindled by his brother, to a player whose family wants to inherit from him while he is still alive. Here are the 10 footballers who hate their families. Number 10, Emmanuel Adebayor. When it comes to family problems, no one in the world of football has had more difficulties than former Arsenal and Manchester City striker Emmanuel Adebayor. The Togolese player has always been very open about the issues he's had with his family. He explained that many of his relatives demanded astronomical amounts of money from him. He recounted that his own sister rented out a house he bought for her without telling him. Moreover, according to him, his late brother Peter wrote a letter to Real Madrid when he was loaned there in 2011, telling them not to keep him at the end of the loan period. And that's not all. Adebayor then accused his family of dividing up his assets among themselves while he was still alive, saying things like, "If he dies, you'll get this car, you'll get this house," etc. The former Manchester City player even accused his own mother of using black magic on him, declaring that this was the reason he cut ties with her. Asked about this subject, he responded, "But how can I stay in contact with my mother if she's the one telling everyone my career will fail? In fact, I wish no one to have such a mother." But the next player doesn't have issues with his mother. Rather, he hates his father for what he did to their family. Number 9, Virgil van Dijk. Have you ever noticed that Liverpool's central defender doesn't have his last name on his jersey? This usually indicates that things aren't going well at home, and in Virgil van Dijk's case, things are far from ideal. One of his uncles explained that the reason Virgil doesn't use his surname on his jersey is due to a family feud, particularly with his father, Ron van Dijk. According to his uncle Steve, when Virgil was still young, Ron abandoned him and his siblings, leaving their mother to take care of them all alone. The defender hasn't managed to forgive his father, and since he doesn't feel connected to him, he decided not to wear his last name on his jersey. Number 8, Dele Alli. Dele Alli also wears only his first name on the back of his jersey because he doesn't feel connected to his family. The former Tottenham midfielder was born to a Nigerian father and a British mother. His childhood was very difficult, and he blames his parents entirely for it. He was born in the UK, and just a week after his birth, his father decided to move to the United States. In his early years, he was raised solely by his mother, who had a drinking problem. At the age of 9, he moved to Nigeria to live with his father, where he spent 2 years, then returned to the UK to live with his mother again. But at 13, he completely decided to no longer live with his biological family and went to live with the parents of one of his teammates. To this day, he still calls Alan and Sally Hickford his adoptive parents, even though they never adopted him legally. In 2016, after signing with Spurs, he decided to stop using the name Ali on the back of his jersey because he didn't feel connected to the family name. But at least his father didn't kill his mother for a trivial reason, like one of the players on our list who was traumatized throughout his childhood, but still managed to play in a Champions League final. We'll get to that soon. Number 7, Paul Pogba. His family drama has never been a secret. He and his brother seemed at peace in 2018 when they were all celebrating Paul's World Cup victory. But things quickly turned sour between them. In 2022, it was revealed that Matthias, Paul's older brother, was involved in a plot to extort up to 13 million euros from him. Matthias was charged and even detained, but the story didn't stop there. Matthias broke his silence and accused Paul of using witchcraft to influence his teammates, particularly Kylian Mbappe. I imagine Mbappe wasn't too pleased, and rightly so. But now, let's talk about Jakub Błaszczykowski, a much more tragic story. The Polish player's life was turned upside down when he was just 10 years old. Get ready to hear the most tragic story you've ever heard. One terrible day in September 1996, Jakub and his older brother David had to watch their father stab their mother to death after a violent argument. His father was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Both parents were thus taken away, and the boys grew up with their grandmother. This trauma led Jakub to take a break from football for a while, but he got back into it later, encouraged by his uncle, a former captain of the Polish national team. He then made a name for himself in football, winning 2 Bundesliga titles and even reaching a Champions League final. As expected, Błaszczykowski never spoke to his father again after that day, until his father's death. We often see the player celebrate his goals by raising his arm to the sky, a tribute to his late mother. Number 5, Lucas and Theo Hernandez. Lucas and Theo Hernandez, who play respectively for PSG and AC Milan, also don't have good relationships with their father. Their father, Jean-Francois, is a former professional footballer who played as a defender at Atletico Madrid. Apparently, Jean-Francois abandoned his sons after divorcing their mother over 20 years ago. Here's what Lucas, the older of the two boys, said when asked about his father a few years ago. He left because he didn't love us, and if he didn't love us, it was better for him to leave. I'm 23 years old now, and I was 5 or 6 when he left. It's been 16 or 17 years since we last heard from him. I don't know where he is, what he does, whether he's still alive or not. In the meantime, I've started my own family. Since he hasn't contacted us, he must not be interested. He simply doesn't want to reconnect with us. It's a sad story, but you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you hear the next story. Number 4, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. What we know about Ainsley is that he grew up with his mother Jules and his brother Cordy. But something very serious must have happened because Ainsley seems to have no love for his mother. A few years ago, Jules claimed that her millionaire son had abandoned her and that she had to sneak into a warehouse every night to sleep in deplorable conditions. It seems the relationship between mother and son broke down when Ainsley was around 20. Indeed, when he made his debut with Arsenal, he said he was going to frame his jersey and give it to his mother, so they were still very close at that time. In 2015, she was reportedly involved in a dispute with Arsenal's head of negotiations, which turned violent, and she was even arrested for it. After everything was settled, Ainsley paid for her to take a break in Australia for some time. Upon her return, her son abandoned her, leaving the house they all lived in and leaving her to fend for herself. Neither of her sons has commented on this situation, so there isn't much information on the details of this story. As for the next player, there's also little information about his life and childhood, but today we'll give you some stories about his early years that you'll hear for the first time. Guaranteed, so listen carefully. Number 3, Alexis Sanchez. One of the greatest footballers in Chilean history, and undoubtedly Alexis Sanchez. Alexis was born in Chile in 1988 and grew up in poverty. When Alexis was only 4 years old, his father abandoned the family because he didn't want to acknowledge that he was Alexis's father. As if that wasn't hard enough, his mother couldn't afford to take care of him all day because she worked in a mine outside the city. Consequently, his uncle Jose adopted him and took care of him. Even though his uncle was in a better financial situation, he simply couldn't invest in Alexis's education. Despite all the odds, Alexis remained determined. He managed to earn a little money by washing cars on the street. There is little information about Alexis's youth because it's rarely talked about, but in an interview, his brother Humberto told some incredible stories. He would receive money from neighbors in exchange for a ball show. Sometimes he was so hungry that he would knock on the neighbors' doors to ask for bread. They would then give him what was left over. To entertain himself, Alexis sometimes boxed in the street. What a story. Number 2, Memphis Depay. The former Barca striker goes by only his first name. According to him, he was abandoned by his father when he was just 4 years old, and he found it unfair to continue carrying the name of a man who had hurt him so much. A few years ago, Memphis Depay's father denied these allegations. He admitted that his marriage to Memphis's mother had failed, but insisted that he was always present in their lives. He even claimed that he was the one who gave Memphis his first football. He was very upset to see his son, now a famous footballer, publicly sever ties with him. The truth is still unknown, but we do know that in 2012, Memphis decided to stop using his last name on his jersey. He has even said several times that he has no connection to his father. Number 1, Erling Haaland. Have you ever wondered why Haaland isn't called Alfing like his father? Unlike the players mentioned earlier, he has no issue with his father. His father is his role model. The reason Haaland isn't called Alfing is simply because the name Haaland is actually his family name. His father is called Alf Inge Haaland, but Erling decided to follow his own path. So the Norwegian decided to use his mother's surname instead.